Hi there. My name is Scott Larson. I am the creator, illustrator, writer of the independent comic book series Visitations. Visitations is the history of Chicago as seen through the eyes of the residents of the city's oldest cemetery. It's part ghost story, part superhero story, and part history all rolled into one. And if you are interested in reading the first issue for free, there is a link below, and you can email me and get a free digital PDF sent to you. This week I'm going to talk with the creators of the website and publishing company called Fanbase Press. Fanbase Press started in 2010 as Fanboy Comics. They self-publish their own books, but in addition to that, they do reviews and they do interviews and they do podcasts. They also do audio dramas. One of which, and I actually think this is the only one that they do for right now, is an audio drama of the Hunger Games series called the Katniss Chronicles. And they started out as Fanboy Comics, and they became Fanboy Press in 2016. And the people in charge of that are Hi there, how are you?
Hey,
Hello, how's it going?
Good. So you guys are in California?
We are, yes, in Los Angeles.
Okay. Were you born in California or in Los Angeles, or did you?
Well, I was born in Hemet, California, but we both grew up in Pennsylvania. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so what brought you out to California, to Los Angeles?
Work, actually. Bryant and I met in college, and we both wanted to pursue various aspects of the entertainment industry. Bryant more in front of the camera and me more behind the camera. So after college, we both came out together, worked in entertainment for a few years, and that's actually what spawned us to really start our own company and help other creators to do what they love.
Okay, so you started Fanboy Comics initially, is what it was called, and what were you doing before that? Or actually, you know what, let's back up before we do that. Let's back up a little bit. So obviously there was comics in the name. What was your first exposure to comics, whether it was like movies or TV shows, or what is it? Barbara, what was your first exposure?
Sure. So for me, in Pittsburgh, I grew up in my parents' kind of mom and pop convenience store. And we had, very much like you see behind me, we had one of those old fashioned comic spinner racks at the store. And I think we had maybe 3 different series. We had a Barbie comic, we had Archie comics, and an occasional X-Men. So that's really all that I knew of comics at the time. But I really fell in love with the 90s X-Men the animated series. That was like my introduction to, there's a larger world out there of pop culture and comics characters. And that really brought me through to the wider world of comics later on.
Okay, how about you, Brian?
For me, I think I always had sort of been aware of comics as a kid, but I really fell down the rabbit hole with I would say around like 3rd or 4th grade, I got really into the Alien franchise, and Dark Horse Comics was in the midst of like a golden age of Alien licensed comics. And so that completely drew me to the local comic book shop, and that just became a weekly thing then. Like every Thursday, for some reason, I think maybe that's when I was allowed to go downtown. But every Thursday, I would make a trip to a shop called the Comic Swap, and from it started out only reading these Dark Horse Aliens comics, but quickly just browsing the shelves, I was exposed to all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. So you guys went out to Los Angeles, and you wanted to be in the entertainment industry in some ways. What was were you thinking movies, or were you actually thinking comics? What were you thinking at the time?
I was never anticipating a career in comics, so it's so funny to look back now and have had my own company for the past 10 years. But when I came out, I actually went to law school for to gain the knowledge of entertainment contracts and negotiations, because my goal in the industry was to do talent management and production. I really wanted to help other creators do what they love. My older brother is an actor. So I grew up from very little behind the scenes on stage. He was mostly a theater actor and commercial actor. So I really saw so many talented people and wanted to really help them to do what they loved and to pursue their careers. And so going to a performing arts college, which is where I met Bryant, that only continued. So that was really my motivation for coming out to Los Angeles.
And I was an acting major, as Barbara mentioned, going to the same school, looking towards film, television. And I guess I just happened, like Barbara as well, I would just happen to dabble in all sorts of like associated, I guess, art forms, a little playwriting here, a little writing there. And then I also had just a hobby of drawing that I never really pursued professionally. I got right up to a point in high school where I had to make a decision about which art career I wanted to pursue. But when I moved back out to LA, or when I moved to LA, those drawing skills suddenly became to people that I was working on with projects became like a resource of like, oh, well, maybe you can, whip up a little storyboards, or you can, help us do like a short comic to help sell the project. And that was sort of the door that opened, at least me, going back into comics as more than, I guess, just a reader or a fan.
Mm-hmm. So are you, so with the site now, and I'm going to talk about that real quick. Then I'm going to ask Bryant a question. So Barbara, you're the editor-in-chief of the site.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, and that makes sense with your legal background and looking to help other creators. Now, Bryant, you're a writer.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't write as much as I would like to, but I co-wrote our first graphic novel. I wrote our second one that we published. I actually have a short in a new horror comic anthology that was successfully kickstarted this month. It's going to be coming out later in 2021. It's called the Nightmare Horror Anthology. But yeah, I always find myself writing things. We've done skits for our podcast and things like that. So this skills seem to pop up in weird little places for me, weird little creative outlets.
So are you still acting?
That's a similar question, I guess. Yeah, it's something where like I'll find myself filling in when someone a friend asks me to, again, do a skit, or maybe they've got a certain reading that they're doing or something like that, and I'll be happy to jump in. But it's not a career path anymore for me. It's more of a hobby or a fun thing to jump back into if I get a chance.
So let's talk about the website, or the site and the comic company. Where did that come from? Whose idea was it? And where did the idea come from? How did that pop up?
That's a great question. I think it was kind of a mutual.
Yeah, I think so.
A mutual idea. We were both working at the same talent management and production company here in Los Angeles, and we, to be perfectly frank, got a little jaded by the entertainment industry, the film and TV industry, because we were seeing so many talented people who just never really. They met with so many barriers, and they never really got the opportunity to succeed or even have the opportunity to get towards any path. And so after leaving that company and, in doing a lot of side projects that would fall apart because, people weren't necessarily fully committed and they didn't want to see things through. Bryant and I are both very driven individuals. And so we wanted to have projects come to fruition. We wanted to help other people. And so that's really where the genesis of the company came from. And it was always sort of a two-pronged approach to the company, both what we say now is that our tagline is that we celebrate fandoms and we create new ones, in that we not only create our own comics and graphic novels, but we also support other creators, even that we're not publishing, through daily reviews, interviews, podcasts, because we believe that there are so many talented people out there. You know, not everyone is going to work in a Marvel or DC, but that in no way means that they shouldn't have a platform and a voice to be able to share their stories with other people.
So why comics and not film or acting?
You know, I'll let you tell the story of kind of the genesis of the company and how we
Sure.
started that.
Yeah, we actually, Something Animal actually was started when we were attempting to shoot some films. That was our first avenue, given that I was a film actor, and Barbara was also involved in the film side of the business. And we had a few friends who had also gone to the same colleges with us and moved out here, that we had sort of formed a little creative group where we were writing these short horror stories and using our apartments and whatever was available to sort of build around. And the comic, once again, for Something Animal, was initially going to be a promotional tool. And I think what really changed our direction on that is we started getting some really impressive artwork back from the artist Robert Burrows. It's all hand painted, that book, and it had such a flavor and an ability to add things that we just didn't have the budget for in the short film. And so we were still in the process of shooting short film, but it just quickly became clear, like, oh, this is the heart of the story. The best medium for it is this graphic novel. And as we started to move into, like, well, how do we publish this as more than a promotional item? How do we actually go through this process? We got introduced to the comic book world and the industry. And I guess what Barbara and I really found is that it reminded us a lot of the stage theater world, where it's small enough that a lot of people. There is a potential to make some money, but that's not why people do it. That's not the biggest draw. The biggest draw is love or passion for the work or for the medium. And I think we felt so at home with this idea of creators who were there for the creation first, and sort of the I guess the glamour second. That was so refreshing that we just fell sort of into this world, like, we fit here, and the more that we had experience, the more that we published other books or did interviews or helped other people, it just reaffirmed that feeling of, like, yes, this is the correct path.
So while you were doing this, and you decided to make this a graphic novel, and you decided to self-publish it, I'm assuming is the way you're doing it. Did you talk to anyone in the industry? Did you like reach out to someone like Newsarama and say, hey, how did you start your website? Or did you know anybody in the industry who you consulted? Or did you just like kind of like close your eyes and just be like, hey?
We have always been people who welcome feedback
Sure.
and look for support in terms of advice or recommendations. So we read a lot of books like Making Comics or How to Self-Publish Comics. We went to a lot of events here in Los Angeles as well, just to meet other creators. Some folks that we met 10 years ago, we are still friends with.
Yeah, definitely.
And they, at that time, they were well ahead of us. So they were very kind and generous with their time and their advice to share what had worked for them, what they were doing. And so I really feel like that's what aided to what Bryant was talking about in terms of community, that when we would put feelers out or when we would meet new people, they were so welcoming and so willing to share what their experiences were. And I think, over the past 10 years in our evolution as a company, we certainly aren't afraid to take chances and to try things and to learn from those things. You're always going to learn whether something succeeds or fails. It's just another opportunity to try something new or to adapt what did or did not work. So, but we definitely found a wonderful community of folks who were willing to share their experiences with us from the very start.
Well, and if people are looking for a specific a book, as Barbara was mentioning, Josh Blaylock's book was the core of what we used. There were definitely others that we referred to, but that book, and they have a few updated versions out, I think, now, but it gave everything that we needed to get on our feet. And then a lot of it was, as Barbara was like saying, trusting some instincts and seeing, like, you know, a try and fail kind of situation. Yeah.
So you decided to do the book, and that came first before the website, or did they go hand in hand?
They somewhat
Yeah.
they were concurrent with one another, I would say. Anyone that has previously worked on a comic will know that the artwork takes a long time, and that's something you certainly don't want to rush. And so we were given some great advice, again, by a colleague, to build our community while we were working on the art of the graphic novel, so that when the time came to actually release it and promote it, there would be a built-in community that we had built, both with other creators, with other readers. And so I think that we started very basically, we had launched a podcast with the website. We started doing some reviews each week. And then I think the big thing that really kind of kickstarted the press that we do in terms of interviews is that we had a colleague connect us with John Bernthal, who at the time was in the first season of The Walking Dead, playing the character Shane. So for us, that was a huge get in terms of interviews. He was so kind and generous. I think I chatted with him for an hour and a half. That we did an interview, and we talked about everything from his stage background to what it was like to work on The Walking Dead. So it was pretty early on in his career.
Well,
too.
and it's funny to think back to that, because I remember thinking back to the quality of it's actually a pretty good interview quality wise, but we were doing like the old school, like put the phone on a speaker and record with a recorder. And,
humble beginnings, exactly.
Yeah, you know.
But honestly, that same thing, that you never know where those opportunities are going to come from, and we were grateful for the opportunity. But then that evolved into doing other interviews, both written and audio. We then got a better quality camera, so we could go to events and do interviews at conventions and other red carpet events. So it really built on one another. But again, simultaneously to the press and kind of geek culture side of things, supporting other creators, we were still working on our own projects, producing the graphic novels. And after our first two graphic novels, which were in-house, we started receiving submissions for graphic novels, which was a wonderful opportunity as well.
So, and I want to ask, I have all kinds of questions about that. But before I start asking, I want to go back a little bit. So how long was it between the time that you started interviewing people and started putting the website up and the time your comic was published?
I would say at least a year, if not longer. The artist we were working with, Robert Burrows, he and I think this is amazing. I mean, but he basically gave up like his lunch break and the time before and after work. But I remember a significant amount of his work being done on like his lunch break. He'd go sit in the back of his car, and he had all his paints set up so that he could sit there in the back seat and just knock out panel by panel on these little pieces of cardboard, and then take them home and scan them and assemble the pages. And we loved the artwork so much that we were like, take as much time as you need. We will be ready when you are ready. So it did take a lot longer than, the turnaround that you have in the normal professional comic book market. But that's sort of the way that we operate. We will operate with a lot of creators who tend to have a second job, or this is something that they're, putting their time in as an investment. So we work with their, their speed. If whatever speed that they're moving at, we find out what's going to work best for them and sort of adapt to that and make sure, obviously, that it's going to, fit our deadlines to a degree, but we don't have the same, the same pressures or the same limitations as some of these bigger publishers, where they have to put something on the shelf every week or every month.
Yeah, I actually find that with my own thing because sometimes it takes me a little while. So I always try to time it for like the next convention or the next,
Sure, yeah.
and that's both a blessing and a curse. It can be a curse because it's like, oh, I got plenty of time. I don't have to work on this. And it's, when you're a creator, laziness is the one thing you have to conquer more than anything else.
Sure.
So what was your following like by the time you launched the book? So you had the site for a year, and you had
Yes.
already
Mhm.
started doing interviews, and
Mhm.
so you had the site, so you were doing reviews, correct? And
Yes.
what were you reviewing? Were you reviewing just mainstream books or movies or TV
I think
shows
we
or?
started off actually with movies. I think our first reviews were movies, and then we knew obviously since we were producing comics, we wanted to get there to be comic focused content on the site, even though we wanted to have a general sort of pop culture openness so that we could, touch on all of our interests. But this was right around the time of the New 52 launch for DC, and so I do remember we kind of assembled a small crew that were interested in writing reviews for the site. And we each took a few of the new titles from DC New 52 in order to launch our sort of comic content. And it was, again, kind of like the John Bernthal interview, where like once we had established sort of our credibility by taking on that content and putting it out there, other doors started to open either through the connections that we had or because we were at conventions. And so we started developing contacts with other publishers, and they started sending us either review requests or adding us to their press list, and that sort of built on itself. Like Barbara was saying, everything sort of snowballs with this situation.
Yeah.
So were you going to conventions before the book was out?
I think
what?
so.
I think we were doing conventions as press, and we weren't exhibiting before the book was out, but we were definitely attending conventions just for fun. But I think we also started doing some interviews and stuff like that, and taking photos with photo galleries, things like that.
Because and the reason I asked that is I have seen the pictures of you guys at the table, and actually one of your reporters came up to me in Baltimore, and I had a great conversation with him. But I'm sorry, what was that?
Was that Travis? I bet.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. Super nice guy. Yeah. Super duper nice guy. So you're doing conventions, and how much were you putting the podcast out? Was it like a week, every other week, or
it was weekly? Every week? Yeah, okay. We've actually done the podcast, believe it or not, every week for 10 years. I mean, we take a holiday hiatus.
Sure, yeah.
Usually late December through January. But yeah, there would be some weeks off when, if we had a convention
holidays
or something or holidays.
Like that, yeah.
But generally speaking, we've had the podcast. It's adapted its name as we rebranded our company 5 years ago. We also rebranded the name of the podcast. But yeah, we've amassed quite a few episodes over the years.
So you launched the book. What was that like? Or actually, let's go back real quick. And I had asked what your following was like before launching the book. You had mentioned that you were doing stuff on the New 52, and so people were like flocking to you because you couldn't have timed that better if you had tried. It's really interesting because that seems to be the focal point of a lot of the modern creators. That's the focal point for a lot of them, and so you did that. You started amassing an audience. So how big was the audience by the time you launched your book?
It's probably hard to tell, honestly, because like I will say that weirdly at least the first 3 or 4 years of the company, I will say that we operated in sort of a dark zone, if you will, where we were like, we know we are throwing this content out there, but the amount of response that we're getting back is minimal, and mostly from people that we know. And so we were building and getting more efficient with things like social media and optimizing our articles so that they were attracting more eyes and things like that. but I would say that I think the first time that I really realized that people were like, that there was a following out there and that we had the ability to kind of judge it to a degree was we got, there was a year at Comic-Con where we maybe had been doing press for 3 or 4 years at that point, and someone came up to us and was like, hey, are you guys Fanboy Comics? And we were all wearing t-shirts that said this, and we're like, yeah, we are. And they're like, oh, you said really nice things about my comic on your podcast. And we were just kind of blown away. This and turned out to be a world famous magician named John Armstrong, who we are very good friends with now. But he also did a comic for IDW called Smoke and Mirrors. And after that, I feel like that was when we like, it was almost like we just operated with the faith that like, hey, we're just gonna keep going with the idea that if we keep putting out content, eventually people start paying attention. And it wasn't until right around that point where I think we started actually getting people in person responding that we started looking into things where we could actually have some sort of tracking of like, oh, this is the following we have, or this is how many people are downloading. Before that, it was almost just like, this is fun, we'll keep it professional in certain aspects, but we're not even worrying about what response we're getting. We're just accepting like we just need to be consistent and maintain a content schedule, and eventually people will start, checking it out.
And that was some advice that we received as well in terms of like, it's completely understandable that folks, when they're starting a podcast or a blog or whatever it might be, are very numbers conscious. And totally understandable. But for us, it has always been, and I think purposefully now, I mean, we're aware of it, and certainly we want to work to build our audience at all times and to grow and evolve. But for us, the most important thing, kind of like we talked about at the beginning with the art itself, the most important thing for us is the quality and what we are putting out, the consistency of that art as well. So I think for us, it's never going to be a strictly numbers game. It's always going to be about, are we putting out good content? Are our readers happy? Are we attracting new readers as well? And are we doing the best of our ability? I think that's the most important thing for us.
So tell me a little bit about the launch of your book. How did you do that? So I'm assuming that you publicized it on the website. Because otherwise there's no reason for you to have it. Did you just start there? Did you do a Kickstarter? Did you take it to conventions? How did that all work?
Sure. So I don't think Kickstarter existed.
Yeah, it was definitely before the
time.
crowdfunding craze. So I don't know if it was out there, but people weren't using it for comics at that point.
Yeah. So we self-funded and self-published the comic, or the graphic novel. And we had a launch party at a nearby comic book shop called Emerald Nights in Burbank, California, which was wonderful. And we did as much as we knew possible at that time. Obviously, our tactics have improved and evolved over the years, as have our media contacts, in order to be able to get promotional copies out there. But this was even folks weren't even providing digital copies for review. So we, based on, again, my knowledge of the industry, I had created physical press packets that we would bring to all conventions that would contain a copy of the graphic novel, an enclosure letter, some collateral in terms of like bookmarks and other press for our site. So.
And we dropped copies off all around the Los Angeles area at various comic book shops. There was a list that we formed of, I think, from all the individuals that were connected to the creative team, just a list of like, hey, who do we want to make sure to get a copy to, whether it's pie in the sky individual or just your former teacher or something like that. And then we also did a few other there were a few other marketing techniques, because what was unique about Something Animal was we had such a long period of time to market it. So I do remember, even before the comic premiered, we did go to San Diego Comic-Con and hand out tons of promos. We would go with paper promos, I think postcards initially. Then we also did something really cool that we haven't revisited ever again, but we had for a while, because it was also an independent film or short film that we were doing. we had a version of the trailer for the film that was burned onto a DVD, and then we had the artist of the comic design a CD case, like a paper CD case, and it had just amazing artwork on the outside. And we just handed out, like, I think a couple hundred of those at San Diego that summer as well. So we did everything, as Barbara was saying. We were just throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what would stick, and a lot of it just got swallowed up. But we did have that success that I think Barbara was talking about, where we had a good turnout for the release. And when we looked at the book and when people responded to the book, we were able to be very proud of it and proud of the quality of it, what we thought, you know, it had to say. And so I think that's the most important for us, as she was mentioning.
So you did the first book, and then you did a second book.
Yes.
And that second book was painted as well, but that was painted by a different illustrator, correct?
That's Megan O'Keefe, yes.
So tell me about the second book.
Sure. So Bryant wrote the second graphic novel, which is called Identity Thief. And it's very similar in tone to Something Animal in that it's horror, it's all hand painted, and it's sort of a monster in the closet story. But we did very similar approaches. Again, we gave Megan as much time as she needed to, obviously, especially if you're hand painting a graphic novel, that's going to take some time. And she too had a day job, so we wanted to be mindful of that and provide her with the time she needed. But by that time, we were learning from our successes and failures from the first book launch. And I think by that time, when Megan was working on the book, is when we started getting submissions from other creators, other writers and creative teams saying, hey, I really liked what you did with Something Animal. I see that you're working on this other graphic novel as well. Do you accept submissions? And so that's really when we actually, since we released Identity Thief, we haven't had an opportunity to publish anything else in-house that Bryant or I have created, just because we've been very fortunate that we've worked solely from the submissions that we receive.
So you actually jumped ahead and answered a question that I already had. Now I'm going to have to throw that away.
Oh no!
So you opened it up and you started getting submissions from other people, and to date you've published 8 different books. Is that correct, or is it more than that?
More like 13 or 14, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I obviously I ran out of papers to come with. So you've done 13 or 14, and there are a couple of them that are series, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah.
Correct.
So they're just not standalone comics. So talk a little bit about that. So you started getting submissions, and you started looking, and I know that there's somebody else who helps you out with the editing aspect of it. Correct?
Actually, Bryant and I are the only, in terms of the publishing side of things, Bryant and I were the only ones who
okay.
Publishing side of things. Yeah.
Okay.
When we started the company as Fanboy Comics 10 years ago, we did work with a partner, Sam Rhodes, who founded the company with us. But about 5 or almost 6 years ago, he departed and went on to different ventures. And so that's actually the same time at which we rebranded to Fanbase Press. And so it's just been the two of us since.
I actually watched a video earlier today, and there was a lady who was blonde and a little bit of
editorials manager, Michelle. Yes.
Yeah, so that's who I was referring to.
Gotcha. Yes, Michelle works. She's actually taking a sabbatical at this time, but she was working on the kind of geek culture side of things in terms of editorial content on the website. Yes. So a lot of when we would do editorial series, essays, op-ed pieces, she would really head up those types of things.
So you guys started getting submissions, and you're sorting through stuff. So you're getting submissions, but I'm assuming that there are actually other companies that the same people are sending stuff to. And so how do you pick and choose what works? Do you take a look and be like, well, we've already done this horror book, so we do this? Or is there something that just like knocks you out and be like, oh, we have to have this? Or how does that all work?
Well, I think we slowly tried to diversify our line. I don't know that we did it like in some sort of super strategic way that I'm like, oh, we were so brilliant about how we did this, but it worked out very well for us. The Identity Thief dropped and worked really well as a co-product with Something Animal. They artwork is noticeably different if you really look for it, but many people think it's done by the same artist when they're just glancing at the table, and both serve the same consumer. So like if you're interested in Something Animal or Identity Thief, you're probably interested in the other book as well. So when we first started selling them, they were very easy to sell as a set. So when we were looking at what we would consider for our next book, we did know we did not want to get defined as only publishing horror, because while we love horror, and I particularly am a big horror genre fan, we are interested in more than that. We didn't want to just publish horror comics. And so we were like, well, let's have something that has a foot in the horror genre, has something that maybe Something Animal or Identity Thief fan who's coming back to the table might take a bite out of, but isn't completely based in that horror genre. And luckily, one of the first things that came across our desks, metaphorically, was The Arcs by Michael Poisson. And he actually, I think it happened sort of untraditionally in regards to submissions for this one, because he happened to be a friend of a few other individuals that we knew, and they recommended that we have a meeting with him because he was interested in doing a comic. And we just got really lucky, honestly. Michael's fantastic. He's a fantastic writer. He's a fantastic world builder. He's super laid back and easy to work with. And he's incredibly on top of things. Meets deadlines. Like, it's almost like the perfect individual who walked in and said, I have a comic I want to make. Will you make it? And we took a look at it, and it was just fantastic. And it had exactly what we were looking for, because The Arcs is an archangel sort of war fantasy. It's based on religious mythology, but it's not a religious story. It's more about the effects of war and long-term war on individuals. And so it's just ripe with carnage and demons and that kind of imagery, but it's not necessarily a horror story. There's a lot more emotional weight and character development than I would say in the previous books, which are sort of stark and isolating. This one got a lot more into characters, and we just had a blast with it. We met the entire creative team. It was fantastic to work with, and we work with a lot of them still to this day.
So you decide to publish that, and how did you do the book launch for that one? Since it was something that was a little bit different, to where your fingers weren't really in the pie, so to speak. Did you go about it the same way, or were there differences in the way you chose to?
I think that there were similar tactics. By that time, we were building a much larger media contact list, so we had a greater opportunity to reach out to other press contacts to request advance reviews or interviews with the creative team. For all of our books, we always do a launch party,
like a physical
launch,
except
party.
For this year.
Yes, unfortunately. But yeah, so I think that marketing our comics and graphic novels has really been an evolutionary process, where some things we have been doing since the very beginning. They might look a little different, but their origins come from our beginning. But some things came from just the experience of having done it for a few years and knowing what worked and what didn't, being able to reach out to folks to say like, hey, you've been very supportive in the past. You've added us to your press lists, so we could get that content out there and get the creative team out there as well.
So that's very interesting. So tell me a little bit more about the conventions. So you've been doing conventions. You've had a table. Well, first of all, how many conventions do you guys have tables at? Because you said something about San Diego.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in a normal non-pandemic year.
Sure. Yeah, we're pretending like that's not going on.
I'd say that we generally do between, and these can be anywhere from one-day conventions and events to multi-day, like something like a San Diego Comic-Con level. We do generally about 12 to 20 events a year. And they range in size, again, from one day, local shows to traveling across state lines. And we find that, we definitely want to, and we would give this advice to any folks out there who are interested in doing conventions, if and when they come back, we would say that, it's always worth a try. And we approached it that way as well, because, it's one thing to attend a convention as a fan. It's a total different experience attending it as an exhibitor.
Sure.
And there's so much involved and so much energy and time and money investment required. And even down to things like your booth setup is going to change and evolve depending on how many different products you have available to sell, not only comics and graphic novels, but do you have other merchandise? And even our sales pitches have changed and evolved so much over the years, constantly. And it's going to change not only from book to book, but overall, especially kind of like Bryant was saying, if you have books that pair really well with one another, how do you have that conversation with someone and engage them? And for both of us, our approach is that we're not really like hard sellers, like car salesmen, like you have to leave our table with something in hand. For us, it's very much about the experience. We want people to have a really nice and cordial experience when they come up to the table. If they don't buy something, that in no way means that a year or 2 years down the line, they could be a consistent customer, so we want to make them have a really solid, positive experience every time that they're with us. And, as they see us year after year, convention after convention, there's a sort of a
relationship.
Exactly. There's a relationship that's built over time. So we don't want to just only have like we see you once and we sell, and we never want to see you again, because we'll probably see you again in other conventions and events. So we want to build that camaraderie with convention goers.
I know that when I first started doing conventions, the thing that I found was I went from being the guy walking through the aisles going like this to people trying to get me over to that table, to being the guy trying to get people over. And it is a different experience. And I think that you're right. You do need, I find that I have to connect with people on a personal level. And I have to forget about sales. Just forget. I mean, if they buy something, great. If not, that's just fine too, because you want to be friends with people first and foremost. So you opened up the site and the publishing company, and so I want to talk about the way you've opened the site up, because you've got different contributors, and you have different people, writing articles and whatnot, but you also have had people sending in books to review. So how did that come about? Because that's pretty unique for a comic book publishing company to review other people's books.
It is.
And I know that when it comes to my book, you guys have been very, very, very nice and very good to me, and I appreciate that. But I'm curious as to how that came about. Where did the idea for that come from, and how has that affected not only the site but you guys and the work that you're doing?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want to?
I don't care. Would you go ahead? You seem like you want to answer it. Go ahead.
I'm happy to. Interestingly, from throughout all 10 years of doing this, I think that's been the aspect of the company that has boggled a lot of folks' minds. That why on earth would you support other people and review other people and kind of give a platform to other people? But as we mentioned, that's kind of like in our DNA of like why we started in the beginning, is to support everybody. We ourselves are huge fans of pop culture of all mediums, and we like embracing that, and we like having fun and celebrating that. And so we want to not only have the opportunity to be creators ourselves and to create content, but to celebrate that enjoyment of the content itself with other people. So for us, we really don't see it as a conflict of interest in both promoting other people and creating our own content, because we generally like to be positive when promoting other people. You know, we're not here to just slam other people or to give negative reviews. We find that everyone is going to be a fan of something, and when we work with our contributors and we work with our staff, especially when they're reviewing things, you know, we ask them, we say, you know, hey, we want to be supportive. We're not here to get people to kind of dampen their spirits when they're creators and never create again. We want to encourage people. So if there's something that you don't like about a project, whether it's a comic, a movie, or a game, whatever, that's fine. You know, be constructive in your criticism, but also try to find the positive aspects. Find, you know, who would be a perfect fan for this? Who are the people that would enjoy this project? And so for us, it's not a competition. For us, you know, there's the other, you know, similarly sized comic publishers out there. There are also the IDWs, the Dark Horses, the Marvels, the DCs. For us, it's not a competition. It's all about getting creators' visions and their stories out there, because everyone's got an amazing story to tell, and we need more stories. You know, there aren't enough stories out there, so why should we limit the folks that are able to tell those stories?
I think it's really fascinating. I think that that's a really fascinating aspect, and I have to be honest. When I found you guys, I didn't necessarily realize that you were publishers. I thought you were a fan site,
Sure.
and it is one aspect of what you're doing, and it's interesting because there are a lot of different fan sites out there. The thing that I find unique about your site is you've got people. You know, is there someone doing an article on family ties?
We had a whole podcast on family ties,
Yes.
And you're doing Deep Space Nine.
Mhm.
And then Barbara, you also started the Katniss Chronicles. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So that was something we try to keep separate from Fanbase Press. That was very much a fan project that Brian and I can't take sole credit in any way, shape, or form. That was a 3-year project out of a complete love of the Hunger Games books. I remember first reading the first book and bringing it to Brian's and being like, oh my goodness, I love this. And I think it was Brian's idea, honestly, to do the audio drama adaptation. But this was well before the movies came out. So we wanted to be able to, again, dive into our creative backgrounds and be able to do a really fun project, but also tap into audio drama, which we found fascinating and a really amazing medium to tell stories. So we thought, what a cool way to bring this amazing story to other audiences. So we had a whole team that adapted the books into audio dramas, and they were pretty faithful adaptations. We had to change them a little bit because we didn't want it to be, it's not an audio book, so it's not just us verbatim reading the book. It's adaptation to adding characters and
scene transitions, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, full score, full cast of characters, sound effects, absolutely everything. So, and thankfully, audio drama has become, it's super popular outside of the US, but it's starting to become more popular here in the US as well. But our goal, and that we succeeded in, was being able to put out, we did 3 seasons total, one for each book. And we released them in advance of each of the movies as they came out. So it was an amazing project. It took about 3 years in total.
When we got to use all the creative aspects we were talking about earlier, both Barbara and I got to act in it. I got to help write and develop each script with Tony Caballero, who was one of our writers as well, and Sam Rhodes, who was also our co-founder of Fanboy Comics. He was the director for each episode. He edited each episode and actually learned audio skills that he took on to a career path afterwards. So I mean, it was amazing, and you can actually see I think when you listen to it, the first one is fantastic, but you can tell how much we progressed with each book, part 1, 2, and 3, and it was fantastic. I mean, you even started pulling in people that we knew from college who were fellow theater theater majors or theater graduates, and we're able to sort of assemble these two teams, both on the West Coast and the East Coast, that were recording and sending the recordings to Sam, the director, and allowing him to edit and give feedback. And it was, to look back, it's impressive, because that is one of those things where, I look at that and I go, that was a different time. Like I was young and I had the energy for a fan project, and I could go, yeah, let's do 3 years of just like fan fiction kind of thing. But it's amazing that it's still out there and people still listen to it. And we still get people that reach out every so often, and say, you know what, I listen to this all the time. It means so much to me. And I guess that's the one thing I will say that for Barbara and I, that maybe this, connects to the heart of Fanbase Press. But for us, I think we're so that was something that touched us so well. The Hunger Games was so close to our heart, those novels, that for us, it was worth making a version that existed out there that was true to the books and sort of true to what we envisioned in our heads, just so that it could exist and other people could experience it as well. And that's worth it. And I love that other people enjoy it, but we don't need anything else from that. Now that it exists, there's something about that experience. And I think other individuals who are at these conventions, whether they're cosplayers or fellow indie creators, they share these feelings. They know what it's like to create for the purpose of creation, or because you love something just that purely, and so that's our tribute to, I guess, our fandom.
And it's so amazing that we've heard from folks all over the world who are now implementing the Katniss Chronicles audio drama into the classroom for educational purposes.
Oh, interesting.
We found out this year that someone in Poland
yes.
Did an entire college thesis on the Katniss Chronicles,
like
and
the use of narration in it,
in
and
audio
stuff.
drama.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to think that there are people all over the world who are listening to us at all,
Right.
have any concept of who we are, is mind-blowing. But it, like Ryan said, it warms our hearts. It makes it feel like, we're so glad that we did this, that it's been able to have such an amazing impact. And I've actually been able to get paid voiceover work from it.
After that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's been really fantastic.
So did Suzanne Collins ever reach out to you?
We've had some folks from the production team reach out.
Yes.
Okay.
We know
we were said that we were told that some of the individuals are aware of it.
Yes.
That through other people, there was never a confirmation or an actual contact, I guess, with any of them. They were. We have to be honestly incredibly grateful, because I mean, the only other big franchise I can think is like Star Wars under George Lucas, where he was very open to like, make your fan films, do whatever. The Hunger Games, Lionsgate, they knew what they were courting, I guess, with the fandom, and how much creation was part of that fandom with the young audience. And so they were very hands off. They could have shut us down at any time and sent us a cease and desist, and they didn't at all. They let that other version exist, and we never we'll keep our opinions of the film to ourselves. There are ones that we like, and other moments that maybe we disagree with in interpretation, but the same way, we didn't try to go out there, and not that we are those people, but we didn't try to go out there and tear down the film, or disparage it in any way, or assert that our version was more correct or something, but yeah, we have to be grateful that they were so hands off with that.
Absolutely.
Well, we're living in this age where something like Star Trek, especially, where Star Trek, they always welcome the fans in, up until recently. Right. But they always welcome people in because they knew that's how they were able to survive. And so I would guess that the people who are in charge are probably like, woo. And I'm sure you're not the only people who did something.
Right. No, not at all. There were fan films and all sorts of tons of stuff out there. They're very creative fans out there.
Yeah.
So I had another question on that, and I forgot what it was. So I do know what it is. So are you going to do one for the new book?
We are not. Unfortunately, we would love to. We loved the new book, first and foremost. It was amazing. But the time and bandwidth required for audio drama is pretty immense. And so unfortunately, given our current commitments to our publishing teams and to our site, we just don't have the bandwidth. So
we did record a podcast on
We
it. So
did,
if people really want to know our thoughts, there's I think 2-hour discussion through the Fanbase Weekly podcast that you can look up and hear our thoughts.
Yeah.
So so where do you see the site going from here, or and the comic business too? So let me dial back real quick. What do you want to have happen with the publishing aspect? Do you want to keep writing, Bryant? Do you want to create some more of your own work?
Yeah, I think honestly, we would love to continue to take submissions, but I think we've also reached a certain point where Barbara and I often have talks about, hey, what if we were a little more hands in, if we were developing the story and then maybe bringing the creators in to pitch on it, or maybe there was something where we could come up with the concept ourselves and then I could handle the writing and then we can bring in the rest of the creative team from there. So I think that's always sort of on the cusp of happening. We just have been really blessed that we continue to get submissions where we're like, well, we have to do this. How can we say no to this? So we've been very lucky, and the people that we work with, they deserve the attention that we can give them as well. We don't want any of these projects to get forgotten as we go forward. They all still have a shelf life way beyond. I can't think of an expiration date on it. I mean, we continue to sell all the books to this day, and really value each individual item that is added to the catalog, because we connect, I think, with each of the stories and end up developing a real relationship with the creators, given that we have as we were mentioning, the extended amount of time that we work with them. So I don't know. I will say yes. The answer to the question is definitely yes. I would like to write more. I think that does, will play into our future. But I think right now, Barbara and I are just looking to maintain on a path where we're able to tell at least 1 or 2 stories, publish 1 or 2 titles per year. Make sure that those are stories that we believe in and stories that we think will have an impact on the readers. And we'll kind of, we'll see where things go. I guess that's kind of adaptation has, I guess, been the biggest thing that I feel like we value, because we never know what's around the next corner. You don't know what kind of wrench is going to be thrown at you, whether it's by the comic industry or life itself. I mean, obviously this year is a huge example, that has had us rethinking so many things. So it is hard to answer that question, say, where does it go next? But I think as long as we can continue to tell stories and have that creative fulfillment, I'll throw it to you at that point, because I feel like I'm fumbling to a degree. No. I mean, that is the answer for me, but there might be something that I'm missing.
I would echo all of that. I think that we are so grateful for the journey that we've been on for the past 10 years. I mean, there are so many bucket list items that you never think will happen. We, a few years ago, got an Eisner nomination for a series Kinsey, which is, I never would have thought getting into the comic industry, like you hear about the Eisners and you're like, we'll never get an Eisner. And to have that is amazing. I mean, that's such an incredible and, again, heartwarming thing. And we're so proud of the team for their hard work. But it's kind of like, where do you go from there? I mean, and that's, you might have those, I know we've had those conversations and talks in years past about, like, is there this new level of anxiety or this new pressure that we have to put on ourselves to maintain a certain level of standard because of that? And it really comes back to the answer of being, no, we need to continue making really high quality work. We need to work with amazing creators that we believe in, and we need to be putting out stories that resonate with us, that have an underlying message, that have characters that are inclusive and positive representations. And that's really what will always continue to be the underlying mission of Fanbase Press, is being a space that is positive and inclusive and giving an opportunity for creators of all kinds to put out their story in the world.
And I think Kinsey is a perfect example of that, because Kinsey has we're so proud of that book. We're so proud of the creative team, as Barbara was mentioning, and we have gotten great things for us and the company out of that relationship. relationship, whether it is the Eisner nomination, the additional notoriety that has come to the company. Like, I mean, it was a blessing, as I'm sure many people who have had an Eisner nomination at Comic-Con can attest to have that visibility that year in Artist Alley, or I guess Small Press for us. You know, there were people that were actually knew nothing about our company, who were coming just to buy that book because they knew it was nominated for an Eisner, and or someone had mentioned, oh, this is the book about a teenager who gets superpowers on her quinceanera. You got to pick it up, you know. And so that's a huge blessing. Obviously, having a great sales day is fantastic. But I think, again, when it comes to like the true substance of what we want when we go forward and why we're doing this, the moments that I think of are when we see a teenage girl, like 12, 13, stop in her tracks because she sees the cover of the book and just immediately zero in on it and pick it up. And just, you can tell on her face that like, she feels like this book's my soulmate. Something has, you know, connected with me. And it's not just, you know, I speak to those moments where it connects with someone very much like Lupe, but this can happen to anyone. This could be like a 50-year-old white man who's having the same experience with Kinsey. But those are the moments, I think, when someone looks at us and they don't always have to say it, but you know, like, oh, this book spoke to me, you know, I got something out of just looking at this. I think that's really what we will always be chasing to a degree.
You know, it's moments like those are very, very interesting, and I've had them as well. And the thing is, someone will come over to you and you'll see it in their eyes. Mm-hmm. And you know, I've had the experience. I had somebody actually cosplay as one of my characters at the last convention, which was, it was odd because we were just starting the COVID thing, so the whole convention is really weird, and it was very strange. But I had somebody else come up and tell me that she was going to cosplay. And she was like super excited, enthusiastic about the book. And, you know, as a creator, that's not always an easy thing to realize that there are people who are connecting with it. And you think of the time that you've worked on it, and it's like, why you didn't think this worked or that worked, or this whole thing cobbled together. It's like you put it together with like Scotch tape or something and like went like this, hoping it would stay together. And then somebody connects with it. And I think that's an experience that my assumption is everybody has that experience, or at least I hope they do. And I really like the fact that you guys are noticing that, because I think sometimes, especially if you're behind the table, you forget, you know, you worry about how much you're going to make and if you're going to pay the table off and this and this and this. And it's refreshing to hear from creators that that's the number one thing. And that's the most important thing. One real quick question, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. How do you think COVID has not just affected you this year, but how has it affected you going forward? What stays? You know, what's something that you picked up from this experience that you're going to keep going with? A benefit, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's honestly something that Bryant mentioned earlier, and that's simply adaptation and evolution. I think that you, as a creator, as a publisher, no matter what aspect of the industry you're in, you always have to be willing to step back and say, you know, times, they are a-changing and they're always going to. And so how do I need to adapt, and what do I need to do to change? For us this year, it's really been about diversifying what we do in terms of sales revenue. We've tried different things. We've always had digital comics in terms of working with the platform Comixology for digital comics. But starting this year, we now work with Hoopla as well, which is, for the time being, they're working towards international expansion, but all US-based libraries work with Hoopla. So as long as you have a library card, you can check out our books digitally online, or if you're able to go to the library in person, you can read the comics there in person. But that's been really helpful and has been another source of income. So obviously it's been a hit for not only us, but everybody in the industry not being able to make those sales at conventions. things. But for us, it's about being willing to really step back and say, you know, what other things can we try? We've done our own version of master classes each month this year, where again, and it's another opportunity very much like when we would do panels at conventions, but now it's virtual, you know, and it's another opportunity for folks to connect with other creators, to learn from them, and to really have that one-on-one opportunity to ask questions and to gain knowledge. So, but you know, it's always going to change and adapt, and we're happy to kind of work with that ebb and flow to see where it takes us.
Yeah, I would just add that I think like some of the virtual stuff I think is really what's going to stay, because I think it'll be a slow ease back into conventions for everyone. By the time we start, even when we start going back to conventions, when they start opening up, I think there's still going to be a lot of sort of buffer zone between when we all feel safe going back, and who knows, you know, what process that'll be, whether there'll be more outbreaks or whatnot. But I think what we have found is that some of the ease of using things like Zoom for podcasting, we used to do most of our podcasting in person because we just liked meeting our guests face to face. It was fun. But the Zoom avenue has provided a lot of additional aspects where we can connect with people that are, you know, hundreds of miles away and have them be on the podcast and chat with us. I think there's also like the way that we're looking at conventions and as Barbara was saying, diversifying how we bring in income. I think some of that will stay as well, just because as we go forward, we're looking at like, I think honestly what everyone else is, like how do you balance both the costs of the conventions, because some of them have gotten to a point where it's really expensive, and it really does, right before COVID hit, we were dealing with, at least in Southern California, a saturation of conventions. You were seeing the same audiences at different shows, and the sales weren't translating anymore. It was starting to decline, and there was talk about which conventions were going to make it. So I think that we're still sort of on the descending side, I think, of that convention boom that happened, but who knows where it goes from here, because I feel like the COVID situation has sort of either accelerated or completely changed it. I don't even know. Like, I'm trying to think like what convention will be the first one to adapt, or who will come back and figure out a way to make it work. But so far, from what we have seen, it's still a work in progress. So even the virtual conventions and those aspects, they work to a degree, but they haven't become exactly a replacement.
So, well, I think we're going to leave it right there. Well, let me ask you real quick, though, is there anything else you'd like to add to anything you've talked about here?
I would just encourage folks to check out the website, which is fanbasepress.com. We're on all of the social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, everything. So you're more than welcome to reach out to us, whether you're a creator who wants to promote their work, or even if you're a creator and you just have questions about what the process is like. Brian and I are always happy to field emails about self-publishing versus submitting to a publisher, the actual development process, marketing, anything, because again, we're all in this together. It's not secret knowledge. Everyone's going to find it out, and it's just really about what works for you. But I would say definitely check out all of our books. Again, everything's available for sale in physical form through our website, as well as Amazon, digitally through Comixology and Hoopla. We've got a new series coming out next April called Nuclear Power, which you can learn about at nuclearpowercomic.com or on our website. We just put out a hardcover edition of Kinsey called Kinsey, the Definitive Bilingual Edition, which if you read one way has the entire English language version of the series. And if you flip it over, it's the entire Spanish language version of the series. So that's available for sale right now as well. But yeah, I would just say thank you, Scott, for your time. Please keep sending us issues of Visitations and your other work. And we appreciate your time and being able to chat with your viewers.
Oh, sure. Yeah, actually, I was going to thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And it's like you said, we are all in it together. and I want to make sure that the people know about you guys and how special what you're doing is, because it's a very, very special. Besides the fact that I think this is the first time I've met Bryant, but I think that the communications between Barbara and I over the course of the past 5 years have been very special. But I think what you're doing is very unique and very, very cool and very, very special. And so, anything I can do to help you do that, I'm happy to do. So I'm going to stop the live stream there. And I usually I'd say, where can people find you? But you anticipated my question again. But the links for Fanbase Press and for some of the comics will be down below. They are not now, but nobody's watching this right now anyway, so it doesn't matter. But by the time you watch it, it will be there. So go ahead and take a look, and I will see you all very soon. And thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Scott. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks.